the I Teach Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 4. What can your remote teach us about hacking? To start off with, one of the things that I want to cover is remotes and TVs and getting new things and all of that. It's Black Friday, and one of the things that everybody kind of associates with Black Fridays is deals and getting new stuff and Christmas and things like that. And so one of the things that you as a person probably do when you get a box or when you get a new thing is you take whatever that new thing is and you turn it on and you use it. Some people might read the manual. My father-in-law certainly does that, reads the user manual front to back. Some people, like my father, print the user manual out in their own paper and keep it in a binder. So there's a lot of different things people can do when they get a new thing. When I get a new thing, and this is kind of interesting, but when I get a new thing, I play with all the buttons. When I get a new TV, the first thing I do is I figure out what each and every button does, and I try to mess with each button in various situations and circumstances to see if it's do anything different. Does the power button do something different when I hold it? Does the menu button, is there a way to press certain key sequences to get the remote to do something, to get the TV to do something that maybe it wasn't intended to do? Maybe there's a hidden game, Easter eggs hidden inside of the TV. Maybe I can find all those. And that's what I do. The first probably 2-3 hours I have with the new thing that I'm playing with, whether it be a TV or a game system. Anything. I try to mess with it and see everything that I can do. This is kind of funny because this happens also when I'm renting cars. And my wife, then girlfriend, when we first rented a car, I started doing that. I started messing with all the buttons, opening all of the flaps, opening every door I could find, and just playing with the car in general. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I then realized that, one, it's not normal, and two, maybe you shouldn't be doing that while I'm driving. But anyway, the point here is that type of mentality, that type of, hey, I must play with this to figure out everything it can possibly do, is kind of the hacker mindset. Now, to cover this front to back, hacking kind of got its footing back in the 1960s, 1970s at MIT. And this was just a group of students, MIT students, that all they were doing is trying to get electronics to do things that they weren't necessarily supposed to do. They were trying to see, hey, what happens if I feed more voltage or more amperage? What happens if I reverse polarity on the electrical circuit? What can I do? Back then, electronics were a little bit more robust in some ways, less robust in others. And these guys were just trying to get these electronics, anything they could, see what happened. And that's kind of where hacking got its footing. The hacking was originally just trying to get electronics to do things they weren't necessarily to do in the first place. So that has kind of evolved in that mindset where, hey, I'm going to see if I can't get this to do something different and see what happens. That is kind of where hackers get their footing. That's kind of where they start. Because think about how hackers get in. One of the ways they get in is by performing functions against software that they aren't supposed to do, which is called an exploit. I am able to find a vulnerability and exploit that vulnerability to make software do things that it's not necessarily supposed to do. So the big aspect of this is a big consideration of all of this is that when you are combating a hacker, you have to kind of think like a hacker. You know, the best cops are those who were previous criminals, or at least that's what movies tell us. And so what we need to understand is how a hacker thinks, what they're doing when they're attempting to find holes and how to plug those holes, and also what kind of crazy crap can we get our stuff to do. Where do we find a point in the software or in hardware that gets us into some place where we weren't supposed to necessarily be? So to to think like that, we kind of have to look at what you're doing. And one of the reasons I bring this up and I'm talking about this is that if you're trying to get into IT or cybersecurity, or even if you're trying to hack, the mindset you kind of need to be in is, what can I make something do? Back in my early days of my first career, this is currently my fifth career, but back in the early days of my first career, I was working in refurbishment, which, if you're not familiar with refurbishment, we take broken electronics or electronics that somebody has essentially thrown away and we get them back to a working state, try to get them as new as possible. And it's a fun job. I tell you, I thought it was amazingly entertaining because we weren't a special shop. We weren't a specialized shop. We refurbished literally anything that came in the door. So if you sent us a TV, we'd work on it. Send us an MP3 player, we'd work on it. You send us a computer, yeah, we're doing it. Xbox 360, reflow, I got that, man. We did everything. We worked on every piece of electronic and gadgetry that you could send us, and we would refurbish it and get it back to as new of a state as we possibly could. And it was really fun because you would have just these different things day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour. And it was a fun job. And I thought it was fun because it kind of exercised that aspect of myself where I get to see what everything does. I've never seen this particular watch before. Hey, what can I make it do? I've never seen this camera. What is this camera? What's so special about this camera? What does this manufacturer do differently than other manufacturers? You get to see this, and it kind of gives you a sense of how people do things. You can kind of reverse engineer how people process and make gadgetry and make electronics and technology and things like that. And so in this job, the most successful techs were those who were able to get into that mindset of, hey, what can I make this do? Because that's how I'm going to test it to make sure it's working properly. And if I can get to that point faster, I can pump out more of these devices a day, more of these devices an hour. And so that is how IT professionals should also treat their job as well. Really, anybody who's looking to work in computers, they should be looking at trying to figure out how their computer and software may have hidden functionalities, may have things that's not necessarily be something that it was intended to do originally, can do it this way. And aside from the fact that this is going to allow you to learn a lot about your software, it's going to allow you to work around problems and figure things out. And so one of the things that you understand when you're learning this and you push yourself is that this is also how people who aren't IT folk, who are normal users, this is how they get to where they get to. And I'm going to sort of trace this back from the beginning, from the origins of why we call users users. So user is kind of a derogatory term. If you don't know this, then I'm sorry to tell you that if you've ever been called a user, if you've ever heard IT folks talk about users, they're generally using it in a derogatory term. And it's unfortunate, but it's kind of true. User is anybody who is, that's all they do. That's all they use. They just use their computer. They don't think about the process. They don't think about what they're doing. And so they call IT and tech support for the simplest things because they didn't bother to try moving out of their comfort zone and looking for a solution. Users are those types of people who call IT and go, my monitor doesn't turn on. Did you press the power button? Power button? Where's the power button? That is a user. That is how that's why we refer to them. But anyways, users are extremely ingenious. They have this ingenuity that allows them to get into places where they may not have. An IT guy can't logically draw lines from A to B. And when you're an IT person and you see a user has done something that is particularly strange or particularly out of whack, this may have been them in a fit of genius or a fit of ingenuity, just created a pathway to get them to do what they wanted to do inside of the software. Most notably, one of the things that this covers is macros inside of Office, Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office has a ton of functionalities, and one of those functionalities is macros. It allows shortcuts for people to create. It allows people to create shortcuts in the software so that they can quickly perform functions that otherwise would take maybe 6, 5, I don't know, 18 additional steps. And so these macros help do that. And I have personally seen users set up their own macros that do some complex and crazy crap, from pulling information from other files to calculating it and spinning it across several different applications, whether it be Excel or Word or Publisher or anything like that. And they create these macros that do all of this amazing stuff, but then they call me to tell me that their printer isn't working, and it's because it's out of paper. These folks are using the technology in such a way that may not have been intended to use. And this is exactly the type of environment that attackers will exploit, that hackers will exploit. And so what you see is, in the world of exploitation, vulnerability and exploitation, in regards to Microsoft Office, you'll see them create macros that do some of these same things. They're leveraging some of this intelligence that your user may have figured out on accident, and the attacker is using this functionality on purpose to create an environment or manipulate the environment that will allow them persistent access and get them into the system and eventually lead to a full compromise. So we as IT folk need to kind of concentrate on that. Now, the one thing that we can do is understand that these possibilities need to be limited. And one of the ways we do that is by creating and crafting user policy. And I have personally been yelled at by several types of people, users, IT professionals, all of that, by implementing user policy and procedures that they don't agree with, or that inhibit their current workflow, or that stop them from using their nifty little macro. And so part of why they're yelling at me is they don't understand the severity of the risk that they're exposing. To give you an idea, a macro inside of Word, or a macro inside of Microsoft Office in general, has the ability so that when you open an attachment or open a document you get from somebody who you think you trust, it can literally lead directly to a complete compromise of your system and completely screw over you. And, a lot of people will fight back and push back against, user policy and say, oh, well, it'll happen so rarely that, it's not even worth it implementing. It's just, I know better. I'm smart. And I have to combat that with, well, you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know when you're going to get got. Could be expecting a document from a trusted source, and they have gotten compromised. And so they send you their email address sends you an attachment that is supposedly the document you're waiting for, and you click on it and you get compromised. You can't tell me that that's never going to happen, because you're just your user. You know that you're going to be doing things, and you know that you're going to be looking for specific aspects or specific attachments, and you know that you're just going to open it. You're not going to put it through a sandbox just to make sure. You're not going to put every attachment through a sandbox. And no, I'm not going to trust you to do that, because when you get into an environment, when you get into a situation where you're having to expedite your processes, you're going to get lazy and you're going to skip that step. And so hackers are leveraging this sort of broken understanding of functionality, and they're just pushing through. So we have to, as IT professionals, as cybersecurity professionals, we have to combat this by eliminating that possibility. And that's why we incorporate these policies and procedure changes. Again, it's not necessarily to prevent users from doing what they want or prevent them from doing what they need to, but it is there to prevent the attacker from doing what they want in order to get in. So this brings me back, all the way back, and we'll drag it all back, to playing with your environment, to knowing what's going on as an incoming IT professional, as somebody who's attempting to learn about technology and explore. One of the base things you can do is just start exploring your world. Find out what each and every button does. Find out what software does. Be one of those folks that people are like, wow, he knows so much about the software, yet he just started using it. Be one of those people. That's a common thing that we face in IT, is we will get a call from somebody who has worked in software, who has worked in a particular piece of software for years, and they are attempting to do something, or there's an error or something like that, and they call IT expecting help. And I'm going to say this: when you call us and you've worked in a piece of software for years and years and years, and you call us and you ask us, hey, what's going on here? If we haven't worked in that software for as long as you, we know next to nothing. We probably don't know anything because we've never worked in that software. We're not specialists in it. So you call us looking for help, and all we're going to do is kind of stumble around. We might do a Google search too. We might look around. But the most successful technicians are going to know what that software does just by looking at it, by looking at the patterns in the UI and functionalities exist by the terms in the menus and things like that. And they're going to quickly catch on to what the software does. They may not be experts in its operation. They may not understand fully what the software does and how it works, but they're going to be able to move around the software a lot faster than somebody who's just coming into it clean. So as an incoming tech, if you've never touched technology before, or you're wanting to touch technology and get into it, become an IT person, or just improve your own skills, work on exploring your own software, the software that you do know and you do use, and just play with it. Just see what it does. See what each and every button does. See how you can manipulate the software and create different pathways instead of just going through directly into the normal process. Spend some time to understand. Heck, there's a ton of stuff that your browsers do that you may not even be aware of that it can do. One of the things that we try to combat in cybersecurity is we try to combat shadow IT, which is people installing stuff on their own, not having any consideration for what it might do. And this is a big security risk. And a large portion of why people do this is because they want their software to do something very specific, but they're not entirely sure how. So they go and download something that explicitly is supposed to do that. And one of the ways that this is apparent that I ran into was it was a download director. That's what it was called, download director. And this was a thing that was supposed to allow users to point their downloads to specific directories inside of their system. And I got asked by one of my co-managed clients whether or not it was safe to install this, and I was kind of taken aback because this was an IT guy asking me this question. I was like, yeah, well, I mean, it's not outrightly malicious, but why are you guys installing this? And he explained the situation. They have a user who needs to download hundreds of files a day, and they need them to go to specific directories, and so on and so on and so on. And it was like, well, I can appreciate the need to install a third-party piece of software to accomplish that goal, but your browser should already do that for you. You can change the directory pretty easily. It's just in the settings. And the IT guy was kind of floored, like, oh, I didn't even think of that. I was just trying to get the user to do what they want. And it's like, well, that's cool. But as a security professional, anytime you can avoid installing software, avoid installing software. And so, again, this is an example of where, this IT guy, this guy probably didn't know, or probably didn't even consider the different aspects of his software. By doing that, by playing with the software and understanding everything that it can do, he might have been able to circumvent this whole conversation and call, because by the end of it, he was like, oh yeah, totally, we're not installing this. It's kind of useless from that perspective. And so, knowing everything that your software can do, and knowing everything that is possible in your environment, can help you prevent these sort of security risks and allow your users to perform their functions in a much more efficient band. And playing with it, honestly, at least for me, I get a kick out of it. It's amazing for me. I love playing with technology and love figuring everything out. And I think that is an aspect of hacking that often goes kind of, it gets ignored. And we, as normal individuals who aren't looking to manipulate an environment to steal or compromise an environment, we miss that a lot. We miss the aspect of, well, why do people do this? And sometimes it is just for fun, and sometimes it's just for discovery. It's not necessarily anything out really malicious, at least not to start with, but can be used in such a way that is possible. And that is how little hackers become big hackers. So to tie this all up, hacking used to not be this malicious thing. Hacking used to be just about discovery and figuring things out and moving electronics and technology and understanding of how different things were possible. That's its origin. That's where hacking got its start. And maybe by continuing to move people into that direction, and by pushing that, we can pull hacking back from being something malicious and get it to where it's just simply people figuring things out and protecting themselves, and not these people who are attempting to maliciously attack you and your environment and everything you own, trust, and want. That's it for this episode. If you guys want to contact me, you can contact me, Matthew at itedmyself.com. That's itedmyself.com. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful day.